Jack could hardly believe it. The numbers on the screen confirmed the impossible. He had won $250 million in the lottery. An ordinary man who could barely pay his bills was now about to change his life forever. His heart was racing, his eyes filled with tears. The hope that once felt so far away was finally becoming real. It was as if, in that very moment, the world had opened a door he never imagined he could walk through. Everything he had ever dreamed of seemed within reach, giving his sick mother a better life, paying off his debts, fulfilling the silent dreams he had carried for so long. But then, 20 minutes later, cruel reality came knocking. One wrong transfer, one mistaken click, and all that money vanished. It was as if luck had handed him a gift, only to snatch it away moments later. Jack felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. How could someone gain everything and lose it all so fast? What had really happened in that fatal gap of time? And more importantly, how could he rise again when it felt like fate itself was working against him? The alarm clock rings, but Jack was already awake. There are days when sleep feels like a luxury, and others when what we call rest is nothing more than a strange, heavy silence filled with restless thoughts. Jack lies still for a few moments, staring at the low, peeling ceiling of his tiny apartment. The old radio on the nightstand, always on low volume, whispers some random song from decades ago, a song his mother used to love. It was the soundtrack of their life, a quiet battle framed by simple things and a hope that stubbornly refuses to die. He gets up, slipping on his worn-out slippers, sneaking through the apartment without making a sound because someone on the other side of the thin wall is still asleep. He walks down the narrow hallway, stepping on the same creaking floorboards as always, and heads to the kitchen. There, among scratched pots and stacked dishes, he prepares the coffee, his sacred ritual. He opens the cupboard, grabs the carefully measured coffee grounds, mixing them with the care and attention worthy of a master. He knows exactly how she likes it. Strong, hot, a little bitter, but always with sugar, because life is already bitter enough, his mother used to say. Jack finds Mrs. Linda sitting, wrapped in her knitted shawl. Her face, already marked by time and illness, lights up when she sees him. Their exchange of smiles is brief, reserved, but it holds within it the entire world they share. He serves the coffee, helps her with her medication, asks the usual questions. Did you sleep well? Are you in pain? Do you want some bread? She answers between coughs, but her eyes drift off for a moment, as if gazing into another time, another place, a softer, more welcoming universe. While she eats, Jack checks his phone, bank notifications, overdue bills, tempting lottery ads. He sighs. Every day is an impossible equation, mentally punching numbers into the calculator in his mind. If I skip one bill here, maybe I can buy the meds before the month ends. If my boss delays payment, I'll have to choose between electricity and milk. Despite it all, he doesn't complain. It's like breathing, necessary, automatic. Deep down, Jack dreams. He dreams big, even knowing dreams can be dangerous when you don't have a single dollar to spare. Each lottery ticket, each raffle, each fragile hope of a jackpot is a spark burning inside him, hidden from everyone, even from himself, to avoid disappointment when luck sprints by and pretends not to notice him. But that morning, something feels different. Maybe it's just exhaustion, or maybe it's a quiet premonition, the kind that makes you stare into nothing and smile for no reason.
The afternoon drags on at a slow pace. Jack had gone to the pharmacy, stood in line at the grocery store, and received a disapproving look from his boss, a man who spoke more with his hands than with his eyes. He returned to the apartment and found his mother dozing. On the worn-out couch in the living room, he sat down with the lottery ticket between his fingers, barely looking at it. Just another drawing, another night of numbers tossed to the wind. The TV hissed quietly, always slightly out of focus. The spinning lights of the lottery globe cast colors across the darkened room. The host's voice sounded distant, but the numbers echoed like prayers in the haze of daily routine. And tonight's numbers are... A pause. 18, 24, 36, 42, 59, and the lucky number 07. Jack frowned, grabbed the ticket, compared. Once, twice, 3 times. Something felt strange. His hands started sweating, his heart pounding like it was trying to tear through his chest. Time seemed to slow down. Sounds faded. The air grew heavy. He screamed on the inside, and then allowed himself a whisper. "It can't be. It can't be," he murmured. Typing the numbers into his phone screen, Jack tried to find any possible mistake. He checked the numbers, checked the lucky number. Everything matched. Everything. "Did I win?" he asked the room, as if expecting an answer from the furniture. Suddenly, disbelief dissolved. He jumped up, tripped over the rug, and ran to his mother's room with teary eyes. He opened the door speechless, holding the ticket like a sacred trophy. Mrs. Linda startled. "Jack, what is it, son?" He dropped to his knees and placed the trembling paper in the old woman's hands. "Mom, we won. We won, Mom!" She looked at the ticket, then at her son. In his eyes, more than any printed paper, she saw that old, almost worn-out hope glowing again. Smiling, she cried in silence. Jack embraced her. They celebrated together. The entire world, for a brief moment, was condensed into that embrace. 2 fragile souls, surviving in the cracks of fate, finally touched by fortune. The breeze through the window carried the scent of the future. In that moment, everything felt possible. Everything became urgent, intense, confusing. The phone rang every hour. Distant relatives, friends who never called, reporters wanting to know who the new millionaire in town was. Jack tried not to lose his mind, setting priorities. He decided to transfer the prize into his account, hoping to bring some order to the chaos. He went to the bank, answered the usual bureaucratic questions, and felt uncomfortable under the curious, envious stares. Done. The money was now available. $250 million. $250 million? Impossible, he thought. Maybe this is just a dream within a dream.
In the old car, already parked outside the bank, Jack picks up his phone. The screen lights up, just a few taps, and it's done. The new life begins for real. He wants to transfer the amount to a secure investment account, just 3 clicks. But in that moment, his finger trembles more than ever. In that brief second of hesitation, destiny unfolds in a spiral of cruel irony. Distracted by notifications at the top of the screen, Jack enters the account details, but on the final field, the phone briefly freezes. He taps again, doesn't notice, sends it. Suddenly, the balance is gone. Jack stares at the digital account stunned. Balance $0. He blinks, shakes the phone, restarts the app. Nothing. No, this can't be! The words escape his lips, hoarse, a mix between a plea and a silent scream. He tries to retrace his steps, reviews the transfer, attempts to cancel, but the transaction is complete. A chill runs through him, like pure newborn happiness had just plummeted into a bottomless pit. From inside the car, he calls the bank manager, who repeats the cold protocols. "Sir, unfortunately, the transfer was made to another account. We can only reverse it with authorization from the recipient." Jack swallows hard, tries to explain, cries, begs. On the other end, someone repeats impersonal phrases. "We're sorry, sir. There's nothing we can do." The world outside slows down. The cars, the noise, the hurried laughter of children, everything feels like a brutal contrast to the storm ripping Jack apart from the inside. He watches the garbage truck go by, the sun beginning to set, a couple kissing, and all of it blends into the bitter taste of tragedy. His phone buzzes again. An ad, a bill reminder, a lottery notification. Even his own victory now seems to mock him, waving from a distance what he once had and now has lost. He puts the phone back in his pocket. For the first time, he truly feels alone. Not the kind of loneliness that comes with minor problems, but a cosmic, cruel, and deep loneliness. The kind that only strikes when the entire universe seems to be laughing at your dream. When he returns to the apartment, the silence is heavier than ever. Jack walks down the hallway with slumped shoulders, his face still wet with tears he can't hold back. Mrs. Linda calls from the bedroom, but he pretends not to hear. In the cramped kitchen, under the flickering cold light, he slides down against the tiled wall and sits on the floor. He leans back and lets himself sink. He's no longer the same man who woke up hopeful, not even the one who shouted with joy just a few hours ago. Something inside him broke, something that may never be fixed. It feels like the entire world has collapsed onto his shoulders. It all happened so fast. How could it be possible? The money, the dream, the new life, all of it crumbled in his hands like sand slipping through his fingers. He tries to rationalize. It was just a mistake. They'll reverse it. It's too much money to just disappear. But deep down, he knows not everything gets resolved so easily. With every passing minute, hope fades. A sound in the sink pulls Jack from his daze. The faucet drips steadily, marking the passing time. He closes his eyes, tries to remember a prayer, a magic word, something that might undo the tragedy. But all he hears is his own breathing, quick, suffocated.
Time stretches. Half an hour later, Jack is still there, motionless, staring at the dirty floor, his hands trembling. Mrs. Linda walks in quietly and sits beside him. She doesn't ask anything, just wraps her arm around her son's back. She knows there's nothing to be said, no comfort, no solution. Jack stays there, unmoving for a long while. Every now and then, his mother strokes his hair, repeating an old mantra. God doesn't close a door without opening another one, my son. But for now, Jack no longer believes in miracles. He's too wounded to hope, too tired to keep fighting. All he can do is survive the night, and maybe, just maybe, learn how to live again. Days go by, and Jack retreats into his own shadow, avoiding any contact with the world. He blocks his phone, rejects calls, discards every trace of hope. His face is pale, beard unshaven, eyes fixed on the dust dancing in the sunlight through the window. What's the point in trying anymore? The bank never called back. Not even those fake telemarketing voices dare to ring. The community, once buzzing with talk of his win and then of his loss, quietly returned to the grind of daily life, split between the morbid thrill of watching one of their own almost make it and the poisonous relief that everything stayed the same. Jack's world shrinks to the back and forth of the hallway,
the trembling spoon of tea in his hand, the invading scent of mold and hospital his mother's illness breathes into the air. His future died before it was born, he thinks. And as if the despair weren't enough, guilt begins to settle in. If only I had paid more attention. If I hadn't rushed. If I'd told someone. If... In this emptiness, the phone rings, a sudden, dry sound that interrupts his private torment. It's not the bank, not a relative, not a debt collector. An unknown number flashes briefly before Jack, in an automatic gesture, answers. On the other end, a voice introduces itself, steady, measured, as if speaking from a marble throne, though wrapped in gentleness. "Good morning, Jack. This is Robert Miller. Don't be alarmed, but I believe I have a sum in my account that doesn't belong to me. I know it's your money. I'd like to return it, but we need to talk in person." Silence follows. Jack's thoughts crash. Suspicion, disbelief, impossible hope. Why would anyone come looking for him? How would they get his number? The name sounds fake, but the tone is far too calm for a con artist. Jack hesitates, but driven by the last flicker of hope, he stammers, Who are you? How is this possible?" On the other end, Robert's voice sharpens. "I want to meet you today, Jack." The invitation is direct, almost commanding, but polite, the kind of tone learned only through years of leadership or solitude. He gives clear instructions: a mansion outside the city, automatic gate, GPS included. He barely hears the rest. His mind runs through every possible route between scam and salvation, but nothing could be worse than this moment. He decides to go. The journey to the mansion feels surreal. Jack gathers what little he has, a wrinkled shirt, quickly ironed, faded shoes. The road seems to stretch on forever, each bend a call to turn back. Sparse traffic, heavy clouds. No bus gets that close to the neighborhood, but Jack spends his emergency money on a taxi, as if life itself were forcing him to gamble every last drop of hope in the dark. When he arrives, the gate's imposing size says it all. No sign, discreet security, sensors hidden in the shrubs. He presses the intercom, announces himself with nervous, fragmented phrases. The response is quick, welcoming. The gate slides open, revealing the distant chime of well-oiled rollers. Jack follows the stone path that winds through meticulous gardens. The mansion, the kind he'd only seen in movies, rises like both a promise and a final judgment. Robert waits at the door, a stately man, elderly, elegant, silver-haired, eyes weary but alert, offering only a brief smile. The nobility of his face is framed by wrinkles that speak more of failures and battles than of easy victories. His voice now in person carries a human warmth. Those who've lived too long tend to choose each word with care. "Welcome, Jack. Please, come in." The interior is spacious, luxurious, but not ostentatious. Antique furniture, tasteful tapestries, black and white photographs framed in silver. A lit fireplace softens the atmosphere, banishing any chill. Time seems to bend, paused within that grand foyer. They sit in deep, burgundy velvet armchairs. Coffee is served promptly on a silver tray. For a few minutes, Jack feels smaller, overwhelmed by a reality he had never dared to enter. Then Robert speaks, almost in a whisper, as if revealing a family secret. "I know exactly how you feel. Winning and losing everything in seconds sounds like something from a movie. But I know that pain, Jack. Believe me. The money that landed here isn't mine, but I won't return it until I understand why would anyone so careful make such a mistake." Jack, with a rough voice, tells the story, the haste, the racing heart, the grotesque error. Robert listens silently, eyes fixed, fingers interlaced over his knees. When the story ends, Robert arises, walking in slow circles near the fireplace. His breathing is heavy, occasionally labored. His expression shows more fatigue than anger. You might think it was bad luck. Maybe. I see it differently. Signs are for those paying attention. Look, Jack, I'm old, I'm sick. I have no heirs. My legacy is dying here. I want to propose a deal. Try this challenge. I have a friend with a small pizza shop on the verge of collapse. Revive it. Prove to me you're capable of carrying on what I've built. If you fail, I'll give your money back. I don't need it. You've got nothing to lose. Destiny didn't bring you to me for no reason. Jack hesitates.
His mind spins, bouncing between excitement and suspicion. He knows nothing about running a business. His most serious job was as an office assistant, but the proposal crashes into him like lightning, burning through all his questions. Robert's face softens, like someone placing a risky bet without expecting to win. He adds, "Take your time. While you're working on this challenge, my housekeeper will personally care for your mother and give her all the support she needs. 2 months. If you succeed, everything changes. If not, you get your money back and return to your life. Deal?" Jack says yes. The word bursts inside him like a silent, dry shot. Robert smiles, more with his eyes than with his lips, and a silent pact is sealed between them. The next day, Jack is taken to his new battlefield, a run-down pizzeria, old and heavy with the scent of cold grease. The smell of abandonment hits him before he even pushes open the door. Empty tables, chairs stacked in the back, walls stained with faded posters and dead lights. The staff lurk behind boxes and pans, casting tired, wary glances. Edward, the manager, assigned by Robert to help the newcomer, greets him with a mix of relief and subtle disdain, the kind only seasoned survivors of disasters know how to wear. What Jack doesn't know is that Robert has secretly tasked Edward to test Jack's morality, offering dishonest deals, creating situations to challenge Jack's honesty.
Jack greets everyone, each sentence carefully crafted to sound humble, every gesture more rehearsed than heartfelt. The fear of failure mingles with the desire to please. Edward quickly approaches, voice sluggish like someone who has tried everything before. "It's a tough situation. If you want, I know some shortcuts." Edward continues. "They could save money on ingredients, switch to unregistered suppliers, pocket some profits, manipulate the numbers, even cut costs by firing a few problematic employees." Jack feels the temptation poke at an old part of himself, the part that knows shortcuts and has justified small wrongs before. He decides to resist. He refuses shady cost-cutting, won't tamper with the books, forbids unfair layoffs. He knows every ethical lapse comes back with interest. He'd rather endure Edward's silent resentment than betray his own name. Inside, he feels the chill of insecurity. Failure seems likely, but better to fall with integrity than to build a new empire on deceit. Throughout the week, Jack surveys every corner of the restaurant like an archaeologist. He talks with waiters, pizza makers, assistants. He listens to stories of debt, despair, clashes with customers, internal fights. In every tired face, he sees a reflection of himself, reversed hope, resignation that grumbles but doesn't give up. He listens patiently, taking notes on ideas and needs. At the end of the shift, he gathers the team. He says little, prefers to listen. Proposing small improvements, he encourages everyone to share practical suggestions, better service, local promotions, partnerships with nearby schools. Ideas start trickling in, shyly, but shine in the corners of the grimy room. Forgotten old recipes, community events, themed nights, revamped delivery. Jack writes down every whisper, every confession. He encourages, assigns responsibility, and even offers small personal rewards. Days race by, and though the revenue crawls, something changes in the atmosphere. The counter gleams, the staff smiles more. Returning customers receive handmade treats, birthday parties are celebrated again in a corner of the peeling wall. Employees' children take part in impromptu weekend festivals. Jack works the register, serves tables, learns how to make pizza, failing often but improving constantly. Edward, threatened by the results, tries new provocations. He spreads rumors, hints at sabotage, sets up small administrative traps. Jack faces them all head-on, sometimes afraid, faking courage. There are nights when he breaks down in the tiny office, tears falling over spreadsheets. But in the morning, he returns whole, greeting each worker by name, bringing hope and energy to the room. Robert visits occasionally. He watches from afar with an enigmatic smile.
He doesn't interfere, but makes it clear he's watching, waiting for something more than numbers or profits. Jack understands, more than saving a business, he has to rebuild trust, others and his own. He values collective effort, punishes dishonesty, rewards integrity, always transparent. He partners with local suppliers, returns expired items, reinvents the menu. One day, he finally feels the first real vibration of success. The customers are few, but loyal. The staff is motivated. Each pizza served carries the promise of better days. Jack receives grateful looks, hears genuine laughter, and notices slow, steady transformation. He replaces the signboard, hangs thank you notes from customers, birthday pictures, and achievements. The once cold space now pulses with new memories, reinventing its roots. But challenges persist. One night the doors are vandalized. Another day a stove is sabotaged. Jack doesn't falter. He calls everyone to unite. The shared fear melts into collective effort, arms locked to protect the pizzeria. The adversity bonds the team. Teachers from nearby schools volunteer to help with events. The neighborhood rallies to bring in more clients. In the midst of the test and fatigue, Jack discovers his greatest victory isn't the money he was promised, but the dignity he preserved. The taste of each day depends more on shared sweat than bank balances. He sees it in the staff's smiles, and in the eyes of his mother listening to his stories at night, that he's rebuilt not just a pizzeria, but his own sense of belief. And yet, the shadow of the pact still looms. The deadline approaches. What will come of it? Failure or redemption? Jack doesn't know, he just walks forward. And step by step, he learns that the greatest prize might just be this: rising again from nothing, winning against yourself, and even if no one else notices, knowing deep down you chose the honest path.
Jack woke up before everyone else, as if his body, now molded by the anxiety of passing days, refused to rest. Outside, the sky was a dull blade. A few streetlights flickered, and shadows took shape among the rubble of hope and reheated coffee. Every morning at the pizzeria began with that bittersweet smell of yeast in the air, mixed with the musty trace of years of neglect and forgotten dreams. He arrived early. He ran his hand over the tables, a rehearsal of a tender gesture, trying to wipe away with each cloth the heavy past ingrained in the wood's crevices. At first, the team received him in silence. It was too early for hope, Jack felt. They were used to abandonment and fleeting bosses, the kind who promised the world but brought only demands and layoffs. Manager Edward would cross his arms and scan Jack from toe to head, like someone who already knew how every story ended, and none ended well. In the kitchen, pans and pizza trays lined up like resigned soldiers in an army on the brink of collapse. The staff whispered among themselves, watching the new makeshift boss trying to understand the workings of that chaotic organism. Jack didn't pretend to be strong. He allowed himself to stumble, to get ingredient names wrong, to mess up the dough, ending up with flour on his ears. He chose to show his scars. Everyone knew their own limits, and maybe, he thought, they'd offer him some empathy in return for his novice mistakes. A smile would only appear, shyly, when an old customer walked in by chance, puzzled by the rearranged chairs, but still ordered the usual pizza. Jack, at the register, faced the challenge of multiplying those rare moments, dreaming that soon a sea of voices and laughter would fill the cold room. Edward, impatient, always suggested the cynical route. "Those old recipes don't work anymore, Jack. We have to cut costs. I've got a supplier who'll shave off the price if we skip the paperwork. No one needs to know." Or, an even lower voice, a push disguised as advice. "By the way, the till's tight because we've got too many slackers around here.
Staff calling in sick, customers skipping out on the bill. If you want results, you've got to set the tone. Jack heard everything. He didn't pretend to agree, but didn't confront Edward outright either. He knew the biggest enemy wasn't the manager himself, nor the shady habits dragging along. It was the hopelessness that killed any chance of change. So, instead, he tried the opposite shortcut. He gathered the team in the break room after hours and, without much flair for speeches, shared his story, his mistakes, and the unexpected chance fate had thrown his way. He spoke of Robert's challenge like someone sharing a secret and a risk. Faces lit up slowly, first with doubt, then with a new glow, like people wanting to believe. Zaya, the eldest waitress, spoke of the time the pizzeria was the neighborhood's meeting spot, of full nights and dishes invented by the old manager. As they talked, Jack took notes. Every recovered recipe, every memory was a clue for how to bring back not just the customers, but the pride and passion in their work. He proposed small events, Forgotten Flavors Night, community engagement parties, a simple relaunch with live music from a local band. He opened the floor to ideas. Someone suggested selling pizza slices at the square in front of the school. Another proposed a new family menu and promotions for birthdays and local sports teams. He followed through, alone at first, printing flyers on the old office printer, handing them out to stores and bakeries. He refined his pitch, reached out to schools, built networks with neighborhood associations. He realized the neighborhood longed to regain a lost comfort, a place where someone remembered your name, served coffee with a smile, and allowed a week's credit if needed.
The first event night was a flop. Half a dozen curious onlookers, no new regular customers. But Jack didn't let it bring him down. The next day, he started all over again. Cleaned the facade, replaced burned-out lights, planted flowers in a forgotten corner near the parking lot. Each gesture was almost pathetic. The return on investment seemed unlikely, but somehow he believed that planting seeds, even invisible ones, was his only true path. Edward, frustrated by Jack's refusal to take shortcuts, began to undermine the confidence of some staff members. He spread subtle rumors, implying that Jack was only there because he was protected by a rich boss, that soon everything would go back to the way it was, that honesty was only good in Hollywood movies. Jack noticed the resistance, and instead of direct confrontation, leaned into listening. He talked. He understood. He shared tasks, calling on each person to own their piece of the whole. The youngest cook, a frail and shy guy named Leo, brought in a forgotten dessert pizza recipe invented by his grandfather. Jack took a chance on it. He insisted Leo lead that night's production. At first, the team mocked him, but when a group of students decided to try it and came back for seconds, Leo's smile lit up everyone around him. That's when Jack realized true leadership is built on small gestures, on placing little bets on others. Then came the small victories. A family returning after years. A school signing a contract for events. A positive mention on social media. A few customers leaving double tips for the great service. Trust grew slowly, mixed with the fear of setbacks. Jack kept sleeping little. He spent the nights adjusting spreadsheets, testing new flavors, replying to messages on the business WhatsApp. He made it a point to always be present, even if exhausted. When his body gave in, he remembered his mother's embrace, the silent promise made to Robert, and the certainty that he could no longer go back to being just the man who lost money through carelessness. Toxic obstacles began to emerge. One night, they discovered the walk-in fridge had been unplugged. Sabotage, everyone thought. The next day, a longtime supplier refused to deliver ingredients, citing an old debt. That night, someone graffitied threats on the back door. Jack felt rage bubbling up, almost gave in to Edward's paranoia. "See, this neighborhood never changes, Jack. They'll push until you give up."
but Zaya's steady gaze and Leo's new smile held him back. In the thick of adversity, Jack forced himself to learn fast. He read management books, watched videos on customer service techniques, copied strategies from restaurants that had become regional references. He introduced loyalty cards, created referral rewards, and launched weekly all-you-can-eat nights at promotional prices. He got everyone involved, distributing bonuses proportional to sales. Money was still tight, miracles weren't possible, but the atmosphere began to shift. Robert showed up twice more. He watched everything in silence, hands resting on his cane, his eyes sometimes benevolent, sometimes pragmatic. He asked indirect questions, reviewed results, rarely spoke of money. He even sat alone at one of the pizzeria's tables like an ordinary customer, ordering pizza and juice, listening to the ambient noise, quietly laughing at the waiter's jokes. Later, he pulled Jack aside. "Do you feel like you're winning?" he asked, looking deep. Jack hesitated. He thought about the overdue bills, the lingering fear, but also about the team's gestures of gratitude, the small signs of return. "I think I'm on the right path. We're not selling illusion, just dignity. That, at least, is enough for me." Robert simply nodded. He said little. Sometimes saving a business is less about making money, more about restoring trust. Then he left, leaving Jack with more questions than answers. The 2-month deadline arrived without warning. On the final weekend, the pizzeria was packed. The smell of baked dough mixed with the free laughter of children. Trays flew from the waiter's hands. Local newspapers praised the return of a neighborhood tradition. The cash register hit its highest earnings in years. Jack, standing in the back of the dining room, watched it all, and for the first time, smiled with serenity. Here was something not even the lottery could have bought. But beneath the joy, a doubt pulsed. Was it enough? Had he fulfilled what he promised Robert? Edward, now resigned, finally approached. He handed over the monthly closing papers and said in a tired tone, "You changed the atmosphere around here. Congratulations on the achievement." Jack only smiled. He knew that regardless of the outcome, he had already won the biggest battle. He hadn't lost himself along the way. That night, after locking up, Jack walked home with his head held high. His body ached, but his soul was light. He had fulfilled the task, reinvented the present, stitched hope into each of his employees and into his own heart. He knew tomorrow could be hard, maybe harder than today, but he had learned, through fire and honor, that dignity never fails, and luck, when it comes, always tests the worthy. And now he was ready for the next step.
Jack closed his eyes for a moment as the warm breeze crossed the doorway of the newly reopened pizzeria. It was Saturday morning, one of those days when sunlight floods the city with the promise of new beginnings. Inside the dining hall, voices had been echoing since early. Laughter, chairs being dragged, a muffled hymn coming from the kitchen. The hum of movement, subtle applause for all the small victories planted in recent weeks. And there, without announcement, as silent and discreet as ever, Robert crossed the threshold. He wore an elegant suit and leaned on a slender cane. The features of his face, which had always resembled weathered stone, now showed a tenderness that was almost paternal. Jack noticed the old man's arrival from the sudden pause in the staff's rhythm, a brief silence, a knowing glance from the hostess Zaya. He approached Robert, hesitant, still feeling the sting on his skin from the demands of the unexpected. "Come," Robert said, nodding toward the back corner and walking without waiting for a response. They sat near the window, where, for the first time in years, a line could be seen forming outside. Jack looked out, trying to decipher his own reflection in the glass. Robert gazed at the movement too, eyes that seemed to see beyond the present. "When I was young like you, I thought every challenge only mattered for the end result. With time, I understood that sometimes surviving our own mistakes is a greater victory than achieving something final. You've done more than I asked." Jack didn't respond, only nodded. He felt the weight of the days rushing through his mind like a silent current, looping back, retrieving sleepless nights and fears drowned in coffee. On his face, a mix of relief and disbelief. Robert observed him for a long moment, somewhere between affection and caution. Then he spoke as if granting a secret. "Today, you didn't just save a pizzeria, you saved a story. You brought dignity back to this place, and by doing so, you restored something in me, too. I always believed money was the thread guiding destiny. Now I see the true value lies in people, in the bonds we rebuild when all seems lost." Then he pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his blazer and handed it to Jack. Inside was more than just money or contracts. It was the recognition of a silent pact, forged in the subtle territory of ethics and affection. It was the passing on of a legacy. Jack held the envelope, his hands trembling with gratitude. But he felt it went beyond that. He wasn't just holding a material responsibility, but the continuation of something greater, a future stitched together through the fine threads of survival. "Do you accept to carry on my legacy, Jack?" Robert asked, calm but firm. Jack took a while to answer. Time seemed suspended between them, like a long pause before the final chord of a composition. At last, he lifted his head. "I accept, but not just for what I've gained. I accept because of everything we learned here together." They stood, their eyes steady, as if celebrating a quiet and secret victory, the kind only understood by those who have lost everything and dared to rise again. When Robert said goodbye and left the restaurant, Jack remained by the window. Outside, the blue sky stretched above the rooftops. The wind tossed the newly planted flowers in the garden. The pizzeria was full, TVs on low volume, children crowding the counter, employees laughing near the oven. The smell of basil and fresh garlic mixed with hope, that hard-to-define scent. Jack's mother came to visit that day. She sat at the main table, wrapped in her colorful shawl, eyes moist and proud as she watched her son moving confidently through the room. She looked into Jack's eyes and saw no longer the fearful shine of a broken dream, but the steady light of someone who had found his purpose. As the afternoon wore on, the lines of customers continued. There weren't enough tables, but there was plenty of gratitude. Some familiar faces from the neighborhood, curious folks from the past had returned. Teachers, students, parents, all wanting to witness the place's rebirth. And Jack, with every round of pizza, every smiling child, confirmed to himself that he had achieved something money alone could never buy: respect, belonging, the chance to finally become a strong root instead of a leaf in the wind. Time passed, but he no longer felt rushed. He walked among the tables, observed the work of the staff, now united, proud, caring for the place as if it were their own. Nothing felt temporary anymore, and the risks of the past now seemed, strangely, the best seeds of the present. When it was time to close the register that night, Jack stepped onto the small improvised stage and said something simple, in a voice not too loud but heard by every ear in the room. "We didn't win alone. If we're here today, together, it's because we leaned on every stumble, every helping hand, every decision to stay on the just path. And that's what I want to share from now on. May this place always be a home, a symbol of what's possible when we don't leave luck to chance, but to the character of each of us." The whole team burst into applause. Customers stood, smiled, reached out to shake hands, as if sealing that pact, celebrated in the kind of simplicity only ordinary and extraordinary lives understand. At the end of the day, Jack stayed alone in the dining hall. He wiped one last table, straightened the chairs, walked past each old portrait hanging once again on the wall. He looked through the window and saw the sleeping street.
the blinking traffic light, the blooming garden bed, and the reflection of hope in the glass.
Beside him, Zaya said goodbye with a serene look. Leo turned off the lights. Jack took a moment to breathe and sat down in front of the cash register, empty of money but full of futures. He thought of Robert, thought of his mother, thought of everyone who had crossed his unlikely path, and smiled. For the first time, it wasn't a smile of relief or expectation. It was the pure peace of someone who knows, deep down, that even in the driest desert, seeds can grow. And so, Jack ended that night not only as the man who managed to rebuild a failing pizzeria, but as a silent symbol of new beginnings. His journey, marked by stumbles and tough choices, showed that luck may slip through our fingers, but what we build with integrity can never be taken from us. What remained for him wasn't the reclaimed lottery money, but bonds, roots, and the certainty that the true value of success lies in the courage not to be corrupted, even when everything tempts you otherwise. A new chapter, even more challenging, was just beginning in Jack's life, managing the empire inherited from Robert. The challenge will be great, but Jack has already proven it's possible. Above the $250 million in Robert's billion-dollar empire, Jack discovered the true value of life. And perhaps, when you look at Jack and each character in this story, you might see yourself reflected in the details of the daily struggle, in the hope that insists on blooming even on the darkest days. Because deep down, all of us have dreamed of a change in fortune. All of us have fallen, and most importantly, all of us can still choose to rise again, stronger, more aware, and more faithful to who we truly are. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, every story is an invitation to hope, to reconnection, and to the belief that ordinary people can live extraordinary days. Hit the notification bell, share with someone who needs inspiration, and come follow the next chapters of this adventure called life, because together we are always stronger. See you next time.